Hello and welcome to another episode of Colorado Politicking. I'm your host, Pat Poblete, and we are going to have a heavy focus this week on the gubernatorial campaign trail because Governor Jared Polis has just kicked off his re-election campaign. The good folks at the Gazette Visuals were there to catch an event that he had in Colorado Springs. So we're going to start off there with a sense of what Polis is saying right at the beginning, right as he's announcing his re-election.
We are a party of solutions. And together, there's no problem that can be thrown at us that the best of us can work together to solve. And that's exactly what we're going to do here in El Paso County and across the state of Colorado. I'm running for governor. I'd be honored to have your support. Thank you, El Paso County. Happy to take some questions.
And again, great work from the Gazette Visuals, bringing us all of that. And from there, we're going to pivot into a little bit of analysis and bring in political correspondent Ernest Luning. Ernest, I'm curious because we've done a lot in terms of reporting on what it is that Polis says he wants to campaign on. There's a lot of ink spilled on it. In fact, you can read your stories just below us, right down there on coloradopolitics.com if you're watching the video there. But what I'm curious about, Ernest, is how is it that Polis plans to go about winning re-election if it comes down to that? Last time around, his first campaign for governor, he had a very narrowly tailored style, kind of very focused on a couple of specific issues. Are we expecting that again?
Well, it looks like it out of the gate, Pat. And that was Polis ran kind of an interesting campaign 4 years ago. He from his launch, he talked about three things: making all-day kindergarten free for parents. Later, that was expanded to also include preschool. He talked about moving the state toward 100% renewable energy power sources by 2040. And he talked about saving people money on healthcare. You know, and those themes, it was hard to get Polis, the candidate, to talk about much else other than that. And as it turns out, he's claiming mission accomplished to the extent that he can on those. We've seen healthcare costs go down for people who buy their health insurance through the exchange, who don't get it through their employers. We've seen it go down dramatically in some places in the state through a reinsurance plan that Polis put in place. We've also, in his first year, he got free all-day kindergarten, and voters approved a measure to make free preschool go into effect next year. We've also got the state on track to 80% renewable energy sources for its power grid by 2030, which Polis says is ahead of schedule. So reorienting to this campaign, he's got two messages. He said what he was going to do, and he did it. And this time, here's what he's going to do. Right now, he's talking about saving Coloradans money while they're facing record high inflation and some other prices, as the economy on paper and from a overall view seems to be recovering quite well from the pandemic. But people aren't feeling it as well as they're looking at all these cost pressures in their daily lives. That's something Polis emphasizes as he kicks off his campaign.
Now, Ernest, Polis certainly will be on the ballot, but he won't be alone. There will be a Republican challenger on the other side of that as well. And so let's switch gears here and head into the Republican field. You do a very good job of providing weekly, sometimes daily dispatches from the campaign trail. We haven't really heard a lot from the Republican candidates. Where do they all stand right now?
Well, there's 12 Republicans running. Only 6 of them have actually raised or spent any money or done much actual campaigning outside some social media posts. And only 3 of them have really have emerged as real contenders for the nomination. We've got University of Colorado Regent Heidi Ganal, who at this point is the only Republican who holds statewide office in Colorado right now. We've also got Greg Lopez, who was mayor of Parker back in the 90s. He also was the state director of the Small Business Administration in Colorado. He ran for governor last time and didn't do so well. He didn't win the nomination, but he's been running ever since. Danielle Neuschwanger who's a realtor and a rancher from out in Elbert County, is the dark horse to watch. She's been winning straw polls left and right after candidate forums. Those are very unscientific measures of support. But the fact is she's doing well in those polls. Other candidates are not. Ganal has yet to show up for a candidate forum, and that's something that Neuschwanger points out every time they get together. She said that she'll be attending some coming up in the next month as we move toward the primary. But Ganal is the only candidate who's petitioning onto the ballot. That's expensive, but if you can get the signatures, you can be assured you're going to get on the ballot. The other candidates are going to try to get on through the assembly. I think there's a good bet that Neuschwanger is going to make it into the primary. Don't know about Lopez. We're hearing from a lot of folks that, you know, he's run as the consummate outsider, kind of a Tea Party candidate. But the fact that he's been running now for going on close to 5 years, people are saying that Lopez is kind of the establishment now, just because he's been running so long, and they're looking for a fresh face. That's what Neuschwanger is providing.
Thanks for providing that rundown of the candidates, Ernest. And like you said, with 12, there's quite a few to track, even though it is narrowing down. What I didn't hear, though, and what I'm curious about is what areas do these candidates think that they have a chance to kind of find some flaws with the Polis administration, the first 4 years of the Polis regime? How is it that these candidates are going about addressing their eventual competitors should they win that primary?
Well, Pat, yeah, the Republicans are running on a fairly unified message this year. They're basing it on this commitment to Colorado that the state party and a bunch of elected officials and conservative groups came up with last summer, and they're planning to run on education, reducing costs, making things more affordable for Coloradans, and increasing education opportunities in Colorado. Lately, they've also been hammering public safety, as the crime rate has reached levels that we haven't seen for more than a couple of decades. They're hitting Polis hard on that. Some Democrats are saying, well, you know, that's not really something that the governor has as much to do with as local DAs and police departments and other law enforcement groups. But, you know, we're going to be hearing a lot about Colorado's crime rate and about some criminal justice reform measures that Polis was involved in and has signed. They're also talking about the high cost of living, and, you know, as happens in politics, whoever's in power is going to get blamed for that, regardless of what's behind it. You know, that's something that Polis is taking on from the get-go with his campaign, talking about reducing the costs of some things that the state can control, like some fees that were scheduled to go into effect. The Republicans say, hey, you're just delaying fees that you've already approved. You know, but Polis says, you know, that's still money in the pocket for Colorado residents. There are some other things, like taking on affordable housing and making that a priority in the second term of his administration, things like that. But you're going to be hearing from Republicans about crime, about inflation, and basically blaming the Democrats for this way that people feel about those things heading into the election.
Well, thank you, Ernest, for sharing a little bit of your time with us and coming in and telling us that in person rather than having us read your stories, which you can do just below us once again on coloradopolitics.com. But for Ernest, I'm Pat. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and we will see you again next week.